I'm wondering sort of where Azure is going to, like how it has changed and where it is going. Can you talk, Adam, like how it has changed in the last year or so, and where do you see it going, or where would you like to see it go? If you were in charge of Azure, what would you do to change it going forward? What sort of improvements would you make in it? Huge question, I realize. It's like,
yeah.
Make yourself CEO of Microsoft for one moment.
So I'm gonna take a pass on this one because I have a hard time remembering what I can talk about and what I can't talk about.
Okay,
so,
no, you're right. That's true.
I'm gonna bow out of this one and let
good. Okay.
others on the phone.
Eric, be controversial. What would you change? I mean, how have you seen Azure change in the last couple of years? Where do you think it's going in a larger sense? Where would you like it to go?
Yeah, I see. So there's a lot of ways that we can do things. So I have some similar challenges as Adam here of
right.
Oh, you do? Okay.
disclosure, but
Gotcha.
so I'm thinking about things like just the struggles that we might have or scenarios that don't work well, like things today that don't work well are when I do need to scale up massively. Maybe I have a process that's not. I have this massive system, but I have this one process that can't be done in parallel. Maybe it's some weird analytical problem that is serial, so I just need the biggest CPUs and as much memory as I can possibly get in an instance. And so stuff like that would be really nice. Along those same lines, like specialized hardware. So if I needed anything that was specialized that wasn't part of this kind of commodity data, a set of hardware in Windows Azure, there's no way for me to do that, to plug that in without merging it on premise.
Yeah.
So those kinds of things would be really nice. I have no idea if Azure is going in those directions, but it would be really nice to have that sort of stuff. So things as simple as like a SAN. Like I don't really want a SAN. Like maybe it's at a software level, but I want the same sort of like iSCSI targets that I would have in my own data center. Stuff like that.
Right.
So there's all sorts of things where right now, maybe another vendor. So now I'm playing the other side of the fence. I love Windows Azure, and I think it fits for most things.
Right.
But there are scenarios today where Windows Azure just doesn't fit, and maybe your own data center is a better solution, or a vendor like Rackspace where I can put whatever customized hardware I would need in the data center. I can go with them. So
interesting.
So, yeah.
Right. So like the co-location and that. From more of the development perspective, I think of like the Team Foundation service, and they're putting out a lot for source control, and I see a lot of uses from the Azure hosting of that, and they're starting to release those on a very frequent basis. And I'd like to see, that continue to grow. I'd like to see SQL Azure. I'm not sure if it's now SQL Server in Azure or something, the official name or something, but
right.
I'd like to see more parity between the on-prem, and I do know, at least from what I've read, publicly available, that goal is there to get those more and more complete, because I run into clients right now that have a little bit more complex schemas or setups, like between multiple databases, and that becomes some pain points or requiring some re-architecting again, so it better fits in the cloud. So, going down the road, it'd be nice to see a couple of those features come in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's probably worth, for those who don't know, pointing out the difference between the Windows Azure SQL database, pardon me, the multi-tenant version of SQL Server, and then pointing out that if that doesn't serve your needs, you can put up your own cluster of virtual machines in the back end and run the regular everyday SQL Server to get all the full features of the enterprise industrial strength SQL Server too. So I think what Greg is pointing out here is sort of there isn't 100% parity between those, and there are some features that would be awesome to have in the multi-tenant sort of shared, easy. You don't have to put up a server at all; just throw a database up in the cloud version. And more and more, a lot of those features have come online as it's been out there longer and longer. When it first shipped, I think it was limited to the maximum size of a database was 50 gigs, right? And then it went up to 150, and I think it's gone up to 500 recently, or if it hasn't, it probably will soon, right? For a maximum single database instance, things like that. So the product does continue to evolve, and of course Eric can talk a lot more about that because of course he's writing a book about it right now.
Eric is writing a book, yeah.
So to add, I'm gonna, before you jump in, Eric, I want to add to that. From what I understand, they're also doing parity from the user interface. So the IT pros that are used to managing the on-prem type setups, that they should not have a learning curve or much of a learning curve by wanting to move or host some of those things in the cloud. And I think that's a great vision as well.
Yeah, I think that's actually a great point, Greg. So the IT pros up until recently have kind of been left out of this. It's really been, the target's always been kind of around developers. There's not been a lot of emphasis on the IT pros. But over the last year or so, I would say there's been a lot more emphasis in that IT and IT pro space, even to Greg's point where they're making the UIs consistent. So we go to the Windows Azure portal to provision VMs or some services in the Windows Azure portal. Now on premise, I can install the Windows Azure pack, which gives me that same Windows Azure UI to go provision VMs and infrastructure services in my own data center. So that's coming around. Things like a single management platform like System Center to manage both things. So the IT Pro story is becoming better and better. I think we could use some more there, just to help that IT Pro. The IT Pros just generally, there's a lot of to our point earlier of support. There's a lot of stuff out there for developers, but I think there could be more and more for IT Pros to get their hands around, their arms around Windows Azure. So, but on the SQL database side, their SQL database is a relational database as a service. So it's like SQL Server, like a database in SQL Server as a service. And Greg was pointing out that there's no Microsoft Distributed Transaction Coordinator running out there for us on the SQL database side of things. So if we wanted to do some things across databases in a transaction or join across databases, we can't do that. And oftentimes we see that in applications on premise. So you could go out and ramp up SQL servers in VMs if you had those kind of limitations, but in terms of what we would like to see going forward, customers love that whole platform as a service thing. They love not having to patch servers. They love, just letting Microsoft worry about that. And so getting more and more parity on that SQL database would be really nice. To that point, there's been some announcements over the last couple of months with improvements in SQL database. There's a new feature called, it's in preview, but a new feature called SQL Database Premium that lets you kind of carve off your own slice of a SQL server, so you have guaranteed consistent performance. So I know I always have one core and this much memory for my SQL database. So there's always new stuff coming in Windows Azure.